Welcome, welcome. I'm your host, Brian Halley, and you're listening to the Brandstanding podcast. I'm excited to help you unlock the magic of brand strategy to supercharge your business in a way that's practical, easy, and fun. So let's dive in. Welcome to episode 2. My name is Brian Halley, and I'm here with my wife and co-host, the amazing Emily Halley.
Hi, everyone.
Hey,
Good to be here.
It's good to have Emily here with me, and we're going to dive right in. Today, we want to talk about a common brand myth.
A brand myth.
Yes, a common brand myth.
Okay.
So people often think that when they decide to go into business and go get a logo designed, that they are done branding.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yes. So branding is just about your logo.
Yeah, so I have a logo and therefore I've done my branding.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, I've got it. Like I ask people a lot, like, do you have a brand? And they said, yeah, we went through a company, we have our brand and all that. And you find out that they got a logo and they got their colors and they feel like they're done branding. And I'm like,
Gotcha.
oh,
Okay.
whoa.
Yes.
So we're gonna talk about that today.
Okay.
All right.
Awesome.
Debunk that myth. All right. So before we do that, let's talk about the history of branding and go into that a little bit. And so it can be traced through the following stages. We'll kind of go back in history here. Sorry, it's not a history lesson, but this will help a little bit. It started with livestock ownership. You know, the practice
of branding animals.
Yeah, exactly. You guys know that. They still do it today. Yeah, branding livestock to just identify who owned the cow. If it got out in Farmer John's lot, they knew who it belonged to and they could bring it back.
That makes sense.
All right. Then it moved on to artisans and merchants, and they began to use branding to indicate the source of their products, like where it came from, like fine wine or something nice. It's like if it came from this country and this place, the name or the name of the company like had this amazing quality. And that's a good thing.
And you're even talking about like hundreds of years ago, people were already using logos to distinguish their stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and distinguish it from maybe the other vineyard that had really bad stuff or something, right? And so they wanted to make sure that they were seen and they could. That started in that background.
Okay.
There. And then next, it moves over to factories and companies. Factories and companies began to use branding to claim their products to differentiate themselves from others, which is probably what we're most familiar with. And then we have this big change into mass media with technology. And so the introduction of the radio and television allowed manufacturers to create demand for their products by associating it with emotional benefits.
Okay, so that's kind of like when we were growing up and we would see commercials for like Toys R Us, right? And then all of a sudden we make these Christmas lists for our parents that are hundreds of toys long because we just have to have all the things.
All the things and all the name brands, the Matchbox cars.
Because we want to be a Toys R Us kid.
Yeah, we have to be.
Yes.
They're telling us we have to be a Toys R Us kid. If we don't have toys, we're not
Right, right. We're emotionally attached here.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, so before the invention of like television and radio, you probably just had available to you the brands, the retail stores that were in your own local town. Right?
Yes, very
so
local.
If you were to start a business, you would probably be easily able to compete with those around you because you would be aware of the other competition. You'd be aware of what your product could do better than the other.
Absolutely.
Right. And then so what happens as we get further into the 21st century, we start to reach a threshold where there are so many companies competing that it's not enough just to say, here is what my company does better. Here's the benefit. Here are the features. You have to do something more. As early as the 1980s, something started to happen on Wall Street. And this story comes from a book called The Hero and the Outlaw. I think it's really fascinating to understand where we're at in the history of branding, that we are in this kind of new territory still, because this just started to happen 30, 40 years ago. So on Wall Street, corporations started to be acquired for more than just what their product or service was. They were acquired based on their powerhouse brand. And this meant that their brand had a trait or it had a quality that people didn't fully understand yet. Um, their brand had some kind of meaning associated with it. Their brand stood for something. And so branding has transitioned from just being a mark to distinguish, here is my product or here's my service, to something that actually conveys a promise to people, that it stands for certain values, a certain experience. And so all of those things are wrapped up in a brand.
Excellent. Yes. A very, very interesting switch. Absolutely. When it came to that, because it's kind of recent, like, right? Didn't that happen? Like 1983 is when
Mhm.
this started to happen, and there's more value. And people are like, why do these companies have more value? What it makes them different? What is features and benefits? We could duplicate that all over the place, but why do people have loyalty for these companies? What is that indicator? Right.
Right, right.
So I'm going to take you on a little, like, if our listeners, I want to take you on a little journey here. If you have a business, you're thinking about a business, I want you to close your eyes and imagine yourself on the sea in a boat, and you're looking across all the businesses that are out there. And these are the icebergs. You see the tips of the icebergs across all of them, and you see thousands of iceberg tips. And
With little businesses on top of them.
with little businesses on top.
Okay.
And that's all you see. So the first thing that lets you know what business that is what? What identifies the name of that company?
Oh, so they have some kind of like a logo or a sign with their name on it?
Boom. It's just like, that's it. That's us. That's who we are. All right. And so that's what you have access to. As a customer, you're looking at across businesses and you see that logo with your eyes.
Okay.
That's what we have access to. Now, how do you learn more about that company? What are some other places you can learn about that company?
Well, I guess like a website or social media, if they have a retail store or advertising, things like that.
Excellent. Yeah. Commercials. You're hearing things on the radio, all the touch points. But what lies beneath that is where you create a brand. So you're looking at that as a business owner and you're like, when I start a business, I first think I need a logo and I need the website and you need all the stuff.
Because that's what we see all the time around us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so you go for that. But a brand, it is a promise. It's the big idea and the expectations that reside in each customer's mind about a product, service, person, or company. And just to give the example of from our first episode, I talked about the Jelly Belly story, and I shared that story where when we went into Jelly Belly, they've been around for 20 years plus, and we had to find the soul of this company because we knew the features and the benefits, but we didn't know how to direct the expression of the brand.
That's right, because they didn't have a brand standards book, so you had to go back through the history of all of their designs, their communications, and kind of try to reverse engineer what their brand was all about.
Precisely. So as a team, we went back into the history of it, found out what was working, what was good, what made us, because they figured it out too. They're like, wow, what made us better? Why do people love Jelly Bellies more than other jelly beans? And so we narrowed it down to this big idea as 4 words. It was colorful, flavorful, fun, and gourmet. Those were the big ideas. Those 4 words inspired the communication and the art and the website and the social media for the entire company. And so this is the challenge I ran into with working with hundreds of businesses, is that most people that want to start a business see the tip of the iceberg of, I need a logo. I need to go out there and make the logo. So they do. They go out there and find a designer and they make choices on, do I like this logo? Is it my favorite colors? Did my friends vote for it on Facebook? And they skip the most important steps in the development of the brand.
So you've got to develop like all of this stuff that's going on underneath the surface
Yes.
of this iceberg tip.
What's crazy is that sounds like it's hard, but what's actually more difficult is when you don't have a brand strategy there as a guide. There are millions of design options up there at the top. Like you like a lot of things. There's a lot of different directions you can go. Your friends like a lot of stuff. It's not a great way to build a brand. And so, how do you create a brand? There are 3 phases, and they are the message phase, the identity phase, the expression phase.
Message phase, identity phase, and expression phase.
Correct.
Okay. So where do you design the logo? Where does that fall?
That is the second phase, the identity phase. So the message phase is
Okay.
where you develop the strategy for the brand. Identity phase is where you visualize that message with the logo. And the expression phase is where you create the rest of your collateral, website, business cards, etc.
Okay. So let's go through the phases
Okay.
with everybody so
Great,
that they
great.
can get a feel for what that looks like. So these are the phases that we follow in our brand agency. Before we ever start work on any kind of design, we have to figure out what it is we're trying to communicate first, right? So I like to imagine brand as a bridge. And what you need to do is figure out on one side of that bridge, who is my customer? And then on the other side of that bridge, you have to figure out, who am I as a company? What do I offer? And then the brand is kind of this thing that you build between the two that helps you communicate how your product or service is going to give your customer what it is they're looking for. So, in this messaging phase, those are the things we need to figure out. And there are 4 pillars inside this phase. We're going to go over these more in depth in the next episode, but briefly, this is how it goes. The first thing we need to figure out in the messaging phase is your purpose. And we'd answer questions like, why does your business exist? What's your mission? What are your goals? And what are your products and services?
Great questions. Deep questions.
Yeah. And important questions.
Yes.
You need to know what your why is, right? Before you do anything. The second pillar is positioning. And this is where you look at your competitive landscape. You do a competitive audit. Who are the other players that are offering similar products and services to you? Who do you admire in that competition? Why do you admire them? We look at how your brand could be different, how you could offer a different experience, how you could stand for something different, what your pricing structure would be compared to your competitors, how available your product is compared to your competitors, all of those types of things.
Lot of things to think about, but
Yeah.
things that really help because I see it come through this process of working on this pillar, and I can't tell you how helpful it is to see the competition, to see what's out there. So instead of looking like someone else, you can develop the brand to be different.
Right, right. It's also important in that phase to identify who your target customer is and everything that you can about them, their likes, their dislikes, where they hang out. All of those types of data points need to be gathered. The next pillar in the messaging phase is figuring out your brand promise. So, what are the brand's tangible benefits that it can promise to deliver on every time? As well as what are the intangible benefits
Whoa,
that you can offer?
what are the differences?
Yeah. So tangible things are things that you can touch, see, taste. Intangibles are more emotional. They make you feel something. For example, maybe your business donated to a charity because they purchased from you. So it's like a little bonus, like, oh, that makes me feel good. Or maybe your product uses all recyclable material. So they felt like they helped the environment. It could be, it just gave them a sense of pride because they own your product over another product because your brand is just fancy that way. Right. So anything that makes them feel something is an intangible. And that's something that you wanna try to be consistent enough with that you can make sure that that customer has that experience every time they deal with your brand, that it's not just a one-time thing.
Kind of like the story from the first episode again, where I talked about Adidas.
Yes.
It was more than just the quality of the shoe. It was
Yes.
when I wore them, I felt like I could fly. That's the intangible benefit, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay. And then the fourth pillar in that phase is figuring out your brand's personality. So you this is the fun part.
This is the fun
This is
part.
the fun part about being a brand today, right? That you actually get to, like, develop a personality. Your brand has a look, it has a feel, it has a sound, it, acts a certain way, it has things it cares about, it has things that it stands for and believes in. People love to interact with brands that have personality, and so this is something that we would develop as well before we go into the next phase. Brian, you wanna talk about identity?
Yeah, yeah. And that personality that Emily just mentioned, oh my heavens, are we gonna get into that? I get the most excited, clients get the most excited about how we do that, and we'll answer it here in the podcast, but
Yep, stay tuned.
yeah, that was all in phase 1. Now we might move to phase 2, which is the identity phase. Now that we have strategically developed the brand's messaging and meaning, we are going to develop its face, the logo. Some people don't understand the importance of investing in your logo. Like, why would it matter? Why does it need to look good? It's everything. It is like your face. It's who you are, and that will come to represent the sum total of all the experiences that people will have with your company and your brand.
Well, it's got a big job, right?
It's
It
got a
has
big
a big
job.
job because all of that stuff that we just developed in the message phase, the purpose and the positioning and the promise and the personality, all of that needs to be represented in a symbol,
That's some heavy lifting. That's
right?
some
So I don't want to give the impression that this myth that branding is not about the logo. I don't want to give the impression that the logo isn't important. It's just that when it's done right, the logo has to represent everything that the brand is. And if you skip that strategy part and you don't know who you are and what you're trying to communicate, then your logo is probably going to fall very short of what it needs to accomplish.
Yes, exactly. And your logo has to be on strategy with that messaging, on target with the strategy. And at the end of the day, you have to like it, but you want to make sure it's on strategy.
Because depending
Really
on what your
important.
strategy says, you're going to pick certain colors, you're going to pick certain shapes, you're going to pick what certain symbols, names, even the name of your business would matter. So, all of those artistic choices are based in what the strategy says, right? Because all of those things help convey meaning to somebody.
Love it. And it sounds like it's a lot. I know. It sounds like, why do I want to take this much time to do it? But don't you want your business to succeed? Don't you want a shortcut to speed things up so it takes less time, less money? You can get to where you're going faster. The people understand you. They buy more and get you more. You want that, right? That's why we do this.
Yes.
Yeah. And we move right into the third phase. The third phase is the expression phase. So we've looked at the message phase, the identity phase with the logo and colors. And once you've developed that, it's time to dive into what your brand's all about, all the touch points, the places where customers interact with your brand. So the website, the business cards, the social media, the email advertising, the trade shows, you name it, there are a lot of touch points to consider in making sure your customer has a consistent experience with your brand. If you just go to the expression phase and skip the messaging phase, This is where the challenge happens. Branding has become a buzzword. Like, I didn't hear it very much 10, 15 years ago. Now I'm hearing it everywhere because a video company will come and say, we will brand you. The web company will brand you. A commercial company will brand you. Brand, we will brand you. And you love that because you're like, oh, I want to be like the big companies. I want to have a brand. And every one of those people that said they would brand you are correct. They will brand you, but they will brand you in what they're good at. Like the video company could come to you and say, "What's your feeling? What do you want to do?" And you'll tell them, and they'll make a great video. And then the web company will come and ask the same questions. What do you want to feel? What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? And you might hopefully tell them the same thing, but it could shift. And then they'll deliver on what they're good at or their style. And the same with the design. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because they're not basing it off of one cohesive strategy every time.
So it alters and it changes. And that just takes longer for the people coming across that bridge you said
Right.
to understand you. It's like they're coming across 10 different bridges and it's going to cost you 10 times the money, the
Right.
time, and we want to streamline that. That's really why we did this podcast is we want to just empower the business owners to understand the power of branding and what it is.
Right. Yes. So here's a recap of the takeaways from today's episode. We talked about how a brand is more than your logo, that a brand is the sum total of all the experiences that a customer has with your company. It is what your company means to people. And that there are 3 phases to branding. The first one that gets skipped most of the time, don't do that. You guys know better now, is the messaging phase. And then the identity phase where you can do your logo. And then finally, you can do the expression and the website and all the other exciting stuff. Inside that messaging phase, there are 4 pillars: your purpose, your positioning in the marketplace, your brand promise, and your personality need to be decided on. So we're so glad that you joined us today. Tune in next time when we take a deep dive into that messaging phase.
See you next time.
Take care.